Page 29. 29. Winston has these dreams, okay, and he has them a lot, whether he's awake, okay, and he has these visions of, the dark-haired girl, where he wants to, assault her and bash her brains and kill her, these other violent images, or he has full-fledged dreams. And a lot of these dreams are of his past, okay? As we go about this, you'll see that his past is kind of foggy in his mind. He doesn't even know how old he is exactly. I think I'm this, I think I'm that. Well, it's whatever Big Brother says I am. You know what I mean? And so he can't quite remember fully what everything is, unless Big Brother tells you. And so we have, I lost my spot, excuse me. His mother. And so he starts having flashbacks, and you'll see this a couple times, where he has memories of his mother. And they're very faded memories, very scraps and pieces here and there. If you've seen movies where people suffer from amnesia, remember that means they just kind of, maybe they got hit in the head and then they forget who they are. They don't know who their family is. And then slowly things start coming back. And then there's usually this big moment, I remember, right? It's very similar to that. Because he will have a wake-up, an awakening later on in the book where things start to make sense. And all of these images, okay, because he even has a dream about O'Brien. I'm not sure if I even mentioned that the other day, about, having this conversation in his dream that he says, we'll meet again in a place where there is no light. Does that sound familiar? Okay? These are things, these dreams that start, they just seem dreams, but they take significance. So as he talks about them, mark up your book and keep track of them because they're pretty relevant. You might not know it now, but if you read a second time through it, another exposure, these things start coming out like, oh my goodness, oh, how did I miss that? Wow, look at all this foreshadowing. But first time through, foreshadowing is sometimes tricky to pick up on. So he has a dream of his mother. We'll spend more time with her later on. But he has a dream of what he refers to as the golden country. Just this beautiful meadow landscape surrounded by trees, kind of isolation. He's in isolation away from the city and mainly away from Big Brother. Okay? He's not alone. Who's with him? Who's with him? The dark-haired girl. So this is turning into a romantic dream in a way. Okay? They eventually do get intimate with each other. But notice there's one part where he is, it's going to be a better example than what I have. Top of 31. Let's just read. The girl with dark hair was coming towards him across the field. With what seemed a single movement, she tore off her clothes and flung them disdainfully aside. Her body was white and smooth, but it aroused no desire in him. Indeed, he barely looked at it. What overwhelmed him in that instant was admiration for the gesture with which she had thrown her clothes aside. With its grace and carelessness, it seemed to annihilate a whole culture, a whole system of thought, as though Big Brother and the party and the thought police could all be swept into nothingness by a single splendid movement. So not only did she get naked in front of him, he wasn't really, into that. He was more excited about how she pulled off her clothes and just chucked them to the side. That act of defiance. Because remember, we established that, romance and sex doesn't happen. Marriage and sex do, but it's for the purpose of procreating little party members. And we'll establish that more and more as we go. Okay, but there is none of this lust and feelings. And so for her to take that off, yes, she's naked in front of him and he's attracted to her, but he was more attracted by the way she just kind of get rid of these overalls, the clothes of the party, and chucked them to the side. Okay? That's very important. Okay? It's the act of rebellion that is so intriguing to him, not necessarily the copulation. Okay? Okay, as he's having these thoughts, he mentions the physical jerks. Just the morning calisthenics. You see this in the military. You hear a trumpet, reveille to wake up, and then people go out and you see everybody doing their jumping jacks together. Okay, now he's in his room doing his, bending over, touching his toes, all these different things. And so as he's going through the physical jerks, that's where he's having these visions and these thoughts. It happens to me almost every time I have to read a textbook or some really long reading that I'm not excited about. I start dazing and thinking about other things. And then you wake up 4 pages later like, well, I read them. I mean, you knew your eye was going. It's not like you were sleeping and turning the page. You were reading, but you know nothing. Okay? Have you guys been driving before? And then a mile down the road, you're like, I don't remember passing the Y. Because you were so focused. Most of you are busy, hopefully not busy doing this, but your mind is completely tuned out to what's going on. And you're just driving 45 miles an hour behind a ton of steel, not paying attention. You know what I mean? That's what's scary. Okay? And that's why people with sleep deprivation, those big semi-trailers, you heard about these people falling asleep at the wheel because they drive for 18-hour shifts or whatever, and they just kind of fall asleep. And well, in the movie Cars, Mac, that's how they end up in Radiator Springs, right? Those little Fast and Furious hot rods going, you know, he's dozing, and they play Kenny G, and that puts me to sleep every time. Pixar, very relevant to 1984. You like how we get there sometimes? Page 34, a very important key moment. I told you that Winston was different than most people. He's not as gullible as most people. Okay? How I mentioned, every time you go back in to research the past, you're going to find what Big Brother wants you to find. Okay? You're not going to find something that Big Brother didn't know about. Everything was placed or fixed or amended by Big Brother. And so when he talks that at this moment, for example, in 1984, if it was 1984, Oceania was at war with Eurasia and in alliance with East Asia. So I wrote it up on the board. Okay? In no public or private utterance was it ever admitted that the three powers had at any time been grouped along different lines. So if we go back, how long have we been at war with them? We look back history books and everything. Everything you find will tell you that we've always been allied with East Asia and Eurasia. They're our enemies. So we've done this forever. Okay, we've been at war with these people. There's nothing that you can find that says you were at war with anyone else. Okay? But here's the important part. Actually, as Winston well knew, it was only 4 years since Oceania had been at war with East Asia and in alliance with Eurasia. So he knows 4 years ago it was flipped. People we call our friends now were actually our enemies, and then vice versa. He knows for a fact, but there's no proof. There is no physical proof. And so then he goes on to talk later on in this book, especially in this scene and so on, about you have to have a doublethink. He knows that that's not true. That has not always been that case. But he has to accept it as true. You understand the double aspect there? You have to fully believe that, or else you could get in trouble. But he knows something else, which is the ultimate real truth. That second paragraph, the frightening thing, skip down to the bottom. If the party could thrust its hand into the past and say of this or that event it never happened, that surely was more terrifying than mere torture and death. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the ability to make somebody, make them vaporize them. Okay, but this is on a bigger scale. Changing history. Okay? He knows that Big Brother wasn't around in the 40s. But if you look up any textbook, Big Brother was there. Big Brother was responsible for creating flight. But he knows Big Brother wasn't around before the 50s. He knows for a fact. But yet, I can't prove it. If I go up to a friend and tell him, I go, oh, okay, well, show me. Okay, fine, I'll believe you, show me. But you can't prove it. It's just in your mind. That's where frustration is. I think I stopped you guys at the bottom of 34. Who controls the past, ran the party slogan, controls the future. Who controls the present, controls the past. Think about that. Look over those words. Who controls the past controls the future? Who controls the present controls the past. Do you see how it's almost like a figure eight, and it just kind of keeps going back and forth? Whoever's in charge, and the power that you wield. Because controlling the past, you ultimately get to dictate what the future is. And whoever's in the present gets to control that past, which that past controls the future, the present controls the past. You see how it plays out? Just kind of like the infinity sign, right? Why do you think the infinity is a figure eight on the side? It's never ending. It's just looping. It just keeps going back and forth, back and forth. Okay. And that doublethink on the top of 35, you want to make a mark of that. I've already mentioned that. It's that ability to believe one thing while still holding on to the truth underneath. He goes on to talk, I think it's in this chapter, about the one time that he had. Does this sound familiar? The one time that he actually had proof? Maybe that's not yet.
Like it mentions
the picture.
It just breaks off.
Okay. That will go into greater detail down the road, but make a mark there. He says, at one time, I actually had proof in my hand that Big Brother was a lie, that there was something being fabricated. I'm thinking, dude, that's your job. You do that every day. Right? We read that in chapter 4. But he actually had something. And we'll go into that detail later when we see the picture, or I guess we technically don't see a picture. When he goes into greater detail about the story and the conspiracy covering up that picture, which is pretty interesting. Bottom of 36, 37, he's going through his, what they call the physical jerks, and he snapped out of his stupor. Smith! Screamed the shrewdest voice from the telescreen. 6079, Smith, W? Yes, you, bend lower. At any time, you must be under the idea that you could be watched. And something caused the operators, you've seen the old school telephone operators. They sit at a desk, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and they're just constantly plugging these wires. Okay, I'll connect you. And they do all this stuff. Just imagine, Vegas. Have you seen those, hundreds of screens? Imagine somebody just sitting there watching these, maybe with a clipboard, and they see everybody doing their exercises. Okay, everybody's good. What's this person doing? Who is that? 3079 Smith Winston. Hey, you! Bend over farther. Now! That's freaky. We were talking in my other class, I don't know if I mentioned here, the hackers nowadays have the ability to hijack into your system and initiate your webcam. Have you heard of this before? Did I talk about that in here?
Schools have done it too.
Yeah, schools have too. But they got in trouble. But people can hack into your system. You could be sitting there doing homework, watching my lectures, whatever, and then all of a sudden, the webcam comes on, and you are being watched. You're putting on a show, and you have no idea. That's kind of freaky, and that's what happens. 1984. That's happening all the time, and you must be underneath. You must be thinking that this could be viewed. So if what we are is 1984, you should assume that your webcam is on all the time. Somebody in the other class goes, well, I just put black tape over my webcam. I said, that's a great idea. Or unplug it. If you can. Some of them are embedded. See, I made some, people are like, okay, I'm not going to use that. They're starting to get paranoid. I'm not meaning to scare you, but yet, look at Winston. Look at what's happening. And the woman who's leading him, look at what she says. Come on, touch your toes. I'm 39. I've had 4 kids. 4 kids. I can touch my toes. What's your excuse? Come on. Come on, we should be in shape. And then she turns it into a propaganda piece. Look at what she says. Look at how she goes into detail about the fighting people. We can only do so much. They're really making the effort. Support your soldiers. Do all of this. It's everybody unified together. Okay, everybody unified together. We don't all have the privilege of fighting in the front line, but at least we can all keep fit. Remember our boys on the Malabar front and the sailors in the floating fortresses. Can you hear how that is a propaganda support piece? And every morning you get to hear that. Every day you get the 2 minutes of hate, reaffirming who your enemy is. In case there was any confusion as to whom you should thrust your angst upon. Okay? And so we kind of have a wake-up call like, we're listening to all of these stories and his dreams and everything, and then we're snapped back into reality that you are being watched and you need to be careful. Okay? He talks about throwing on a face of... His face remained completely inscrutable. Never show dismay, never show resentment. A single flicker of the eyes could give you away. Doesn't that scare you? I mean, think about that. I tell you guys of an assignment you have to do tonight. Can you keep your face completely from passing on your emotion? I want you to read 100 pages before tomorrow. I see eyes roll. I hear, you can't do that. You must just, yes ma'am. Whatever. But further. And he says he touched his toes for the first time in years. I'd probably pull a hamstring. Okay? But that's the thing. You cannot. You have to disassociate yourself. Cut your emotions off. Okay? And everything's good. Chapter 4, page 37. Now we see Winston's job. We talked about him working at the Ministry of Truth. Okay? His responsibility is sit at a desk. You know what those air tubes, that they have at the bank, you put in your little thing. Some pharmacies have them. Goes out to your car and so on. So he sits there until something shows up. Look at page 38. Did you have problems reading that? Yes. Did you spend the time to try to figure it out? No. Well, let's do that. Look at 38. It tells you times. It's probably the name of the publication. Gives you the date. What's the date? March 17th. BB. Whoa, wait a minute. Weren't we just chanting that the other day? BB. BB speech. Mal reported. Mal, bad reporting. You must fix a bad reporting at Africa. So a speech, bad reporting about Africa, rectify, which means what?
Like a formal change.
Correct. Change it. Fix it. Somebody made an error in bad reporting. You need to go back to this date, this Times Magazine newspaper, and make a correction. Okay? The very interesting thing is, what does Winston do upon completing it? He completes it. He sends the correction away. What does he do with this piece of paper? There's a little hole by his desk. It's called a memory hole. Oh, so you can save all of these for future cataloging? No, so it can be incinerated. What has he just done to any proof that any correction had ever been made? It's gone. You open up a draft of whatever paper you're working on. You change two little things. You hit Control-S. Boom. You just automatically saved it. Is there a record of that document without those changes? No. You just burned it unless you change change your name of the file. But you keep everything the same. If I look at it, I can't tell that there was any change. It's gone. You like that term, memory hole? Maybe where memories go to die or something. But it seems like we have all of this, contradictory terms and so on. I think it's only fitting that it's called memory hole, don't you? So then the other ones. The next one, the same type of thing. What's the date on the second one? Right. Go look up the December 19th from 1983, where we have a 3-year forecast. The fourth quarters, there must be misprints, and so on. Fix them. Correct them. Okay? Comrade Ogilvy, page 46. Did he exist?
He does now.
He does now. He is as real as Winston, as real as Big Brother. And I love the last line of this part, and we'll go back and talk more, but the very last line that says, Comrade Ogilvy, who had never existed in the present, now existed in the past. And when once the act of forgery was forgotten, he would exist just as authentically and upon the same evidence as Charlemagne or Julius Caesar or ... Any other famous person you can think of? Okay? Anybody? Can you see the strength in that? The strength, the power. Shakespeare, maybe he never even existed. Maybe he was created, just like this guy. And look at the life that this guy led, right? Look at how he didn't want to get married. He was a member of the Anti-Sex League. At 19, he had designed a hand grenade, which had been adopted by the Ministry of Peace, and which, at its first trial, had killed 31 prisoners. Yeah! Not only did he make a great grenade, but it took out a lot of enemies on his test subjects. At 23, he had perished in action, pursued by enemy jet planes while flying over the Indian Ocean with important dispatches. He had weighted his body with his machine gun and leapt out of the helicopter into deep water, dispatches and all, so that the enemy couldn't get him or the dispatches. He didn't want to get married and have kids because he didn't want that to distract from his energies for Big Brother. He was very fit, and he died a hero. See this propaganda piece? How this has turned out? Now everybody will want to be. We have these posters. You know, Uncle Sam wants you. Remember seeing those? Uncle Sam wants you. It's not too far to think that maybe in the next day or the next week, there are posters plastered with Comrade Ogilvy's face on it. And they can create Photoshop, right? Maybe not Photoshop in 1948, but figure it out. And all of a sudden, there's Ogilvy going, I want you. Be like me. But that dude never existed. Oh, wait a minute. Let me look up all these records. Well, he did exist. He was a member of the Junior Anti. Yeah, he designed a hand grenade. He did all of these things. Doesn't that just blow your mind? That somebody that never existed now has all of this, that he did exist. You just made fiction fact. And there's no proof, none at all, that you're lying. And said Winston, once he forgets it, he'll be just as historically significant and relevant as Caesar and so on. How freaky, huh?